The last time anything remotely like this happened was 150 years ago. It involved a speeding horse and buggy, the clatter of hooves near the White House, and a repeat offender who happened to be the President of the United States. Ulysses S. Grant, who liked spirited horses and had an apparent eagerness to test their mettle, was arrested in 1872 for speeding on a Washington street while driving a two-horse buggy. It was the second time in 2 days that the policeman had stopped the president. In the first, the officer warned him. On Tuesday, Donald Trump became the second U.S. president to be detained by authorities. Grant's episode apparently went unreported in the press at the time, but surfaced in 1908, when Washington's The Sunday Star published an interview with the then-retired officer who arrested the 18th U.S. president. The officer's name was William West, a black man who served in the Union Army during the Civil War. The story was confirmed over 100 years later by the Washington Police Department. While former presidents have been investigated, including Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton, Grant's arrest for his equestrian exploits is the closest thing history can offer to Trump's arrest. Grant and several of his friends, with whom he was apparently in competition, were taken to a police station. They all had to pay $20 in bail, what was described in the news as a kind of guarantee, a sum that today would be equivalent to about $500. The president, who had the look of a schoolboy caught red-handed by his teacher, reacted with good humor to the arrest, according to news reports. He even drove West in his buggy to the police station, where his arrest was processed. On the way, the policeman and the president talked about the former's experience during the Civil War. The president told him he would have no trouble making the arrest, as he admired a man who did his duty, according to the 1908 report. The closest thing to a presidential arrest since then occurred when Nixon, facing criminal prosecution, resigned and received an unconditional pardon from his successor, Gerald Ford, in 1974. In a 10-minute speech announcing the pardon, Ford explained that a long judgment would polarize the American people and damage the government's credibility at home and abroad. It was later revealed that he chose to grant the pardon in order to practice more mercy than justice. Just 11 months earlier, Nixon Vice President Spiro Agnew pleaded not a single charge of tax evasion and resigned. The chief prosecutor said at the time that there were fears that Agnew might become president. A no-contest plea avoided prolonged litigation and allowed Agnew to avoid federal charges for a bribery scheme.